I think we're ready.
Okay,
Let's get her going.
very good. Good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Lusky, K8ZT, and this is the ARRL Field Day Update for 2025. This presentation was written by myself and Marty Wohl, N6VI. There's a number of links in the slideshow, and you're going to want those if you shoot the QR code with your camera, or if you just jot down tiny.cc/FD-2005. I'll also have that available at the end of the presentation. If you haven't done the survey yet, this will get you to the survey, tiny.cc/OHSFD. We'll look at those results in a few minutes. One piece of advice I have starting out is if you're new to amateur radio and you've never done field day before, I would suggest you find a local club to work with for field day. Even if you're not a member of the club, there's many clubs that would be happy to have you at their field day site. And if you don't know what groups are available in your area, there's a couple tools that you can use. The first tool is called the Field Day Station Locator, and I'm going to click on that link. It'll take us out to that link. This is on the ARRL website in the Field Day section, but it is a map of posted field day sites around the country. Now, not everyone has got them posted yet because it's still more than a month away, but if you hover over one of them, or any one of them, you'll see the call sign of the station. If you click on it, you'll see information on the club that's doing it, the location, if they have a go-to station, which we'll talk about later, if they have a talk-in frequency, typically a repeater, and they have a contact person and contact name. If you're interested in joining them, please feel free to call them before field day and say, I'd like to come out and visit you at the site. People will be posting these as we get closer, so there'll be a lot more. But right now in Ohio, we have quite a few already. And by the way, Ohio is by far the state with the most field day. The section with the most field day entries of any section. The second way you can find out is you can use the search for ARRL affiliated clubs in your area, find a club, and then contact them and see if they're doing field day, or go to their website and see if they're doing field day. But again, if you're new to amateur radio, I strongly suggest finding a group that's doing field day. So, a couple notes about this slideshow. It's accumulation of over 5 years of presentation, so we're not going to cover every slide in here, but you can always do that afterward. That's why I'm giving you a link to the slideshow. We'll be skipping through some of the slides and some entire sections during the talk. But what I've done is I've made links to all the areas of the slideshow. So when you go back into this, if you're interested, for example, in finding out about VHF, you can just click on the link and it'll take you to this portion of the slideshow that has VHF in it. So the purpose of the slideshow is to provide both clubs and individuals with ideas and to encourage active participation in Field Day 2025. To get the maximum number of hams involved in field day in whatever class, style, and mode they choose. To make field day a learning experience for all hams with a focus on you and potential hams. For all the details, all the rules, and all the information, you want to go to the ARRL website. And again, you can just click on this link in the slideshow presentation and it will take you there. I'm going to go over some rule changes. The first thing is there's very, very few and very minor changes for 2025. So if you did field day last year, very few changes. There's a slight change in the eligibility criteria for go-to stations for Class A and F stations, and there's a slight change in the way the go-to bonus points are scored. Again, very minor changes. There were a few significant changes in the last 2 years, so let's just go over those also. Last year in 2024, there was a change in the definition of public locations as far as the bonus points go. There was also a change in the go-to station bonuses last year. There were a couple major changes in 2023. Probably the biggest change was the change in power level options. All D stations that want to compete now are required to limit their power to 100 watts output or less. All field day stations, Class A or Class B or Class C, are limited to 500 watts of power. Multi-channel streaming and automated operations are prohibited. They had been, they just clarified that. And there were a few changes in the RAC sections, the Canadian sections, mainly having to do with the territories and one of the sections in Ontario. The Greater Toronto GTA section changed to GH for Golden Horseshoe. We'll go over the sections a little bit later. So traditionally, Field Day is a group-based activity for amateur radio clubs and their members. It's often UHAM's first exposure to HF operations. So if you're an old-timer in Field Day, be aware of those new people that are at your Field Day site and try and introduce them in a proper way to amateur radio on Field Day. It's HF simplex, it's not repeater-based, and it's operated in a contest-like style, although it is not a contest. A lot of people ask, is it a contest? Is it a test of emergency communication? It is neither. It is neither. It is simply a way of demonstrating amateur radio to the public and to potential hams and practicing some of the things we would for a contest or for emergency communication, but it is not either one. It's not a contest, but a friendly competition. It's a great training opportunity. It's a chance to demonstrate amateur radio to the public. It's a chance to try new modes, new bands, etc. It's a chance to meet new fellow hams and a chance to renew acquaintance with old acquaintances. I'm going to skip over a couple of these slides here. There is no one Field Day. If I take you to 100 different sites, you'll see 100 different things. There's a number of things that cause different Field Day sites to be very different. Geography and June weather. Now, we're mostly in Ohio, so we're going to have the same conditions, but if you get down to Florida with 95-degree temperature, or you go out to Montana with 30-degree temperature, there's a big difference in the way Field Day works. Group dynamics and demographics affect it. Traditions of the groups putting on the Field Day. Sponsoring organizations' focuses, the steering committee or chairperson's goals, group goals, the number of participants at the site, the equipment, radios, and antennas being used, and different strategies and planning or theories of success will all change what amateur radio Field Day looks like at any given location. One of the big portions of Field Day is logistics. It is planning and then mobilizing. So I suggest you start your planning if you already haven't. Start your planning soon. You can't plan too far in advance, and you can't plan too thoroughly. Then the second part is going out into the field and setting up and operating. Let's go through Field Day in 8 easy steps. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, is planning, lining up participants, picking a class and number of stations. We'll talk more about that later. Planning the logistics to get the equipment to the site and to support the operations, gathering equipment, and scheduling operators for operating times. The second thing is setting up antennas and your feed lines to get to those antennas. And a couple years ago, 2020, when a lot of people were forced to do Field Day on their own because of the pandemic, I put together this little document on antenna choices because people were used to just arriving at Field Day and having the antennas there. They weren't used to setting them up for themselves. So this has some pros and cons of a number of different types of antennas, including wire antennas, verticals, beams, magnetic loops, and so forth. Each section has slideshows, documents, videos, and in some cases even commercial equipment for each of these different types of antennas. So we have half-wave resonant, non-resonant, resident and non-resident end feds, inverted V's and slopers, wire antennas, wire loops, verticals, beams, stealth and indoor antennas, 10-meter antennas, 160 limited space, magnetic loops, integrated antennas, VHF and UHF, satellites, and some general purpose antenna resources, including this really interesting chart from the villages down in Florida. Their amateur radio group has a lot of people with HOA requirements, so they put a premium on stealthiness of antennas. And you can go to either of these two presentations they have, and they talk about all different types of antennas, and they grade them on a scale of A to F for on-air capability, stealthiness, whether it requires a tuner, how difficult it is to install, how costly it is, and what bands it works well on. So again, all these resources are available at tiny.cc/portant. The next thing you need to do is have shelter. Now, some places you might be able to get away with sitting out at the picnic table during the day and be just fine, But even here in Ohio, it gets a little bit chilly at night. We sometimes have rain. Even if we don't have rain, we can have a thick dew in the early morning. So you're probably going to want some sort of shelter, whether it's a tent, a pavilion, a trailer, a camper, a car, whatever. You're also going to need power. And typically we use emergency power, whether it's a generator or whether it's battery based. We'll talk more about power a little bit later. You need to set up the stations, the radios, the power supplies, the coax, the antennas, the logging computer, the table, the chairs, the lighting, accessories, everything. This is why logistics is important, because if you get out there and you forgot the light, you forgot the extension cord, you forgot the coax, you forgot any of these things, you're going to need to get them or you're not going to be able to operate. And my wife and I typically drive somewhere distant for field day. We've operated from Maine, Montana, Delaware, Vermont, West Virginia, Ohio, and once we pack up the car, if I don't have it with me, I'm probably not going to be able to find it where I end up. You can go to Walmart and you can't even buy cable TV coax anymore. You can't even buy a short jumper of coax anymore. So if you're out of coax, you might need to go to the Home Depot or Lowe's and buy an extension cord and use that. But again, you're going to want to remember things. The next thing is operate. You need to start operating. One of the goals I usually set for field day is to try and get as many hours of operation on each station that's set up throughout the 24-hour period. While you're making contacts, you can also earn bonus points. And we'll talk about bonus points later, but there's a number of bonus points you can earn for different activities. After the event is over, probably one of the most grueling things of field day is the tear down and stowing of all equipment safely and ready to go for next time. But you're not done yet. In the next few days after field day, someone needs to submit the entry for field day to the ARRL. This is an online form. You don't have to submit a log per se. You have to submit a summary of the number of contacts you made. It is not adjudicated like other contests where they check logs against each other. It's not a contest, but you do need to submit all your information. And if you have a bonus points, you need to submit that. And if you're using a go to station, a get on the air station, you need to submit that information on this form. Now, the nice thing about this form is if you don't have a piece of information, you can submit the form and then go back later and upload that information. There's a couple options for field day. You can have your own field day site as an individual, a Class B, a Class C, or a Class D or E station with one operator. Or you can have a hybrid where you're working but then giving your points to another station in a way that's aggregated score. It's not a full score. Don't worry too much about that. But typically, most people operate field day as a group, and that's one of the best things about field day. So the first thing you need to determine as your group is which class do you want to operate in. There are 6 classes in field day, Class A through F, and we'll go through each one of them individually and discuss each one. The second thing you need to decide is what is the maximum number of transmitters you'll be using simultaneously. In other words, how many stations are going to be on the air at the same time. Stations can always change bands, so that isn't the number of bands you work, it's the number of transmitters you have on the air. So if we have 3, and that would be our number that we'd be using along with our class. So for example, if you have 3 and you're a club set up in a portable operation, you would be 3A or 3 alpha. Here's some information on the number of entries by class over the last 8 years and going back to 2010 for some information. So if you see 2,600 entries in 2010, 1,365 are Class A, by far the most of any group, Class B, Class C, and so forth. 2022, we had a drastic decrease in the number of Group A's because that was during the pandemic situation and most people were not getting together as groups. A lot of people operated from home as a D or an E station. Now, gradually that's turning around a little bit, but it's not turning around as fast as a lot of people would like to see. So I've divided this into 2 different categories, A, B, and C, which are considered field categories where you go out somewhere and set up, And non-field categories, the D and E, where you're operating from home. F is at an emergency communication center. We're not going to worry too much about that. It stays pretty steady. There's only so many emergency communication centers in the U.S. to operate from. But you'll notice that we used to be at about 66% field operations. We dropped down to a low of 18. We've climbed back up into the 30s and even into the low 40s, but it's still, the non-field stations are still exceed the number of field stations pretty significantly. So we can see 52 to 43%. Here's another chart showing the same thing. So let's go through each of the classes. Class A is a club or non-club with 3 or more people. That's the key to it. The second key is they must use facilities that are not designed and permanently set up for field day. In other words, you can't have a tower out in the middle of a field that you use every year and say that's your field day site. All the radio supporting structures and things must be set up for field day. All the equipment has to be within a 1,000-foot circle, and typically it's the class most used by field day stations, especially clubs. Now, you might be thinking this next, I'm sorry, we talked about the major change already. The next class, Class B, a lot of people confuse the letter B with battery. The B has nothing to do with battery. Any class can use a battery and operate, but Class B is simply 1 or 2 people, portable. Just like Class A, they're portable like Class A, but instead of being 3 or more people, they're 1 or 2 people. Now, in Class B, because it is so different with 1 person versus 2 people, there's actually a number of different things. So Class B may be a battery, may not be. Can be emergency power, can be commercial power. In fact, there's over 16 different combinations available for Class B. 1 person, Class B with one transmitter, Class B with 1 operator using emergency power. 1B, 2. One radio, 2 operators. 2B1, 2 radios, 1 operator. And then you also have the permutations of battery power or commercial power. So all of these are Class B operations. I'll be 2B1B, 1 operator operating 2 radios simultaneously using battery power. Class C is a mobile station. Now, the mobile stations have to be in a vehicle capable of operating while in motion, but they do not need to be operated while in motion, but they need to be capable. So you can't have a tower next to your car and say that that's a Class C station because you can't drive around with that tower. So Class C stations have to be capable of operating in motion. It could be a car, it could be a boat, it could be an airplane, it could be a bicycle, it could be anything you can operate while you're moving. Class C sounds easy, but to have a good mobile setup, you need to do a lot of preparation. So I have a lot of resources here if you're thinking about operating Class C or thinking about HF mobile operations. You might want to take a look at a number of these. Now, one of the mistakes that people think is, okay, if I take 5 vehicles with stations that can be operated while I'm moving and park them all within a 1,000-foot circle, am I now 5C? No, you're not. C has to be in the same vehicle. A C entry has to be in 1 vehicle. Now, you can have more than 1 transmitter if it's a bus, if it's a boat, whatever you want, but it has to be 1 vehicle that it's in. So you can't have 5 vehicles and say you're Class 5C. If you park your vehicles and use antennas outside the vehicle, of course you can't operate with those there in motion, so you are now a Class A or Class B station. You can't have something like this where your antenna's on the back. You got to stop and put the antenna up. That's Class B. Or if you fill the van up, that might be Class A if you have more than 3 people in there. Class D are home stations operating from a permanent station location using commercial power. In the eyes of many hams, this is not really field day. Now, if you are stuck at home, you can operate Class E. Class E are home stations, but they are using emergency power. So everything stays the same except for the using emergency power. They can use regular power for the lighting, for heating, other things like that. If you are using a computer to make contacts, it needs to be on emergency power also, but if you're just using it for logging, it doesn't need to be on emergency power. Although I suggest it really would be a good idea to have everything you possibly can on emergency power to really simulate an emergency situation. Class F is Emergency Operations Centers, EOCs. I'm not going to talk anymore about that. If you are operating Class F, you already know all this. There is no distributed operation, so I can't say, Tom, you're going to set up one station, Pat, you're going to set up another station, I'm going to set up a station, and we're going to combine all of our scores together and enter under one call sign. You can't do that. That 1,000-foot rule comes into effect. You'll have to be in the same 1,000 feet. There is, though, an aggregated club score. You can enter your scores for your local club, and they'll all show up in the aggregated scores, but they won't show up with your club score. So the way we classify stations is the class, the number of maximum transmitters, and the ARRL section. So I'm going to be 2BWV because I'll be in West Virginia. If you're operating with commercial power in Ohio, you'd be 1D Ohio or 2D depending on how many transmitters you have on the air. If you're operating mobile in Wyoming, you'd be 1C Wyoming. If you're in Pittsburgh operating from your home station, you'd be 1D WPA. Notice it's not the state, it's the section. So Pennsylvania has East Pennsylvania and West Pennsylvania, so they have to give their section. If you're operating using a generator in Brooklyn from your house, you'd be 2E New York, Long Island. There are some strategic decisions involved. The ARRL says if you start setting up on Friday afternoon, you can only operate 24 hours. But if you wait until 2 hours before the contest to set up, the activity I should say, not the contest, you can operate additional hours at the end. Almost no one does. I would suggest not bothering with this. I would suggest you start setting up as early as you can on Friday evening and set up slowly, carefully, and make sure everything gets set up. Don't worry about the extra time that you get if you set up at the last minute, because almost no one is on the air to talk to. Matter of fact, people will scream at you, the contest is over, even though it's not a contest. Other configurations for strategy, station layout. You need to be aware of the ability of switching modes, bands, the number of stations, the logging options, interference between different stations. Normally we operate one radio at our house, and no one interferes with us unless you have a neighbor that's a ham. But when we're operating field day, we have multiple stations in a very small area, and it's very easy to get interference. There's a couple ways to avoid this. One is by planning the way you arrange your antennas to minimize crosstalk between the antennas. Also considering filtering or stubs to remove stations so they don't interfere with other stations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Oh, actually right here, we're at later already. These are all resources for reducing crossband interference. I'm not going to go through each of these, but there's field day interference, managing interstation interference, simple filters using stubs, minimizing interference on field day, and so forth. You can click on any of these resources. It'll take you out to more information. Here's simple filters from a transmission stubs. You can, if you're if you're a Class A station, you can have an additional station that you don't count towards the total number of transmitters. And this is on VHF and UHF. All the bands above HF, you can operate a free VHF station. It can be on 6 meters, 2 meters, 440, any of the bands that you want to use, and it doesn't count towards your total number of stations. It also does not count for the 100-point multiplier bonus for an additional transmitter because it doesn't count as one. There's a second free station you can have if you're a Class A or Class F station, and that is a get on the air station or go to station. This can be a station that is operated by a number of special hams, and we'll talk about those in a second. So any state Class A with 2 or more transmitters may operate in one additional transmitter. So if you're 1A, you can't have a go to station, but if you're 2A, you can. In 2023, they changed the way the go to stations work, and they do not limit the number of contacts. They made the points much higher, and they added some additional bonus points. So who can operate the go to station? The go to station, oh, first of all, if we get there, the go to station uses a different call sign than the field day site. So If I had a go-to station at my site, it wouldn't be K8ZT. It'd have to be under a different call sign. So the go-to station is always under a different call sign. It can operate on the same bands as the field day station. Not that rule doesn't count about operating on the same band and mode at the same time for the go-to station. So who should be in the go-to station? Any person that's been licensed since the previous year. Any generally inactive ham, no matter how long they've been licensed. Non-licensed persons under the direct supervision of an appropriate control operator. You need to submit a list of all operators and participants with your summary to the ARRL when you do your entry. As per FCC rules, the station must have a valid control operator present at the control point if operating beyond the license privileges of the participant or the non-licensed participants. Non-licensed participants can only work U.S. and Canadian stations because of, or other stations that have a third-party agreement with them. This information on the go-to bonus. I'm going to skip over a couple of these slides here. Oh, by the way, you can only have one go-to signal on at a time. Before we go on any further, any questions about the classes, numbers, transmitters, GOTA, VHF? If you can't think of it now, just write it down. I'll be happy to answer it at the end, but if you have any questions, I'll pause for a minute here. Again, if you're just joining us, there is a survey in the chat I'd like you to complete. So if you haven't done that yet, go to the chat and follow the link to fill out the survey. Okay, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. Before we go any further, I want to remind everyone of safety first. One thing the ARRL and most radio clubs stress at field day sites is safety first. And there's a whole ARRL safety checklist that you can click on and get information on safety matters. This is the one from 2020, but there's a new one on the this website. Especially if you're going to be operating solo, be very cognizant of safety aspects. It's very easy when you're out there by yourself to forget about things and not pay attention. Some tips for safety: don't rush, don't cut corners, don't go near overhead wiring. I'm going to add a couple more here. Don't climb unnecessarily. A temporary tower is not safe to climb. Be careful with generators. Two main threats with generators. The first one is refueling, especially with gasoline generators. If your generator is not designed for hot refueling, which most of them are not, you must let it cool down before you refuel. Now, some of them have tanks that you can remove an extra tank away from the generator, fill it, bring it back on, reattach it to the generator safely. But make sure you know what the safety factors are for your generator. Another thing that's very important for both gas and diesel generators is to be aware of carbon monoxide. Now, we normally think of carbon monoxide being a problem if you're in a confined area like a garage or a patio or in a house. But it can also mean just a small dip in the landscape where carbon monoxide can accumulate near the ground level. So you need to make sure that you're not at a place where you're going to end up with carbon monoxide accumulating where you're operating. A lot of people ask a question about Class B. If I have a house, can I go out in my backyard, put up temporary antennas, use portable equipment, use emergency power, and be a Class B station? Well, the ARRL has a frequently asked question specifically about that, and they say that it's not consistent with the rules. If convenient access is available to the house, that's not really a Class B, that's a Class E station. And you can go through and read this whole FAQ to decide whether you can use your own property for a Class B station. My suggestion is, if you're going to do that, pack everything in the car, drive twice around the block, come back, set up in your backyard, never go back in the house again. And I don't think there's any question about that house. But if you're able to go back in the house and grab equipment, do things like that, then it's definitely not a Class B station. So think about going somewhere else, especially if you like to operate POTA. Class B is a great chance to go to a local park and operate, or somewhere else. If you are thinking about Class B, a couple hints. And these also work for Class A stations. Things like go boxes, where your station is already set up and ready to just open the doors and start operating, are really convenient as opposed to hauling the equipment out and having to set everything up. Also, you tend to forget less connectors, microphone jacks, etc. when you're doing it this way. I have a whole presentation on portable operations and go boxes that you can go through for more information. And I have a whole presentation on portable operations in general. So one of the very easy ways to do Class B is leave the equipment in your vehicle, put up an antenna outside, and operate from a local park or somewhere. That's a great Class B setup. It's not a Class C because you're using an antenna outside the vehicle. We already talked about that. If you're going to be out operating on your own, you need to make sure that you have everything you need. And one of the things I strongly suggest, especially if you're traveling outside the area, is to have a backup USB drive with you in addition to your computer. And that should have everything on it so that if your computer dies, you can borrow someone else's computer and reinstall any software or anything you might need on it. I suggest having all the install program for your logging software. If you're going to operate WSJTX, have that install program, have the drivers and firmware for your radios, sound cards, etc. And I strongly suggest PDF copies of your manuals. Even though you might have a paper copy, it's much easier to search a PDF version and find what you need to change at the last minute. So even not just Class B, but any station, I would strongly suggest you have a backup USB with all the information you need to operate that station. I suggest you make a list to ensure that you have everything you need. And one of my tricks is, before I go out and operate, I take all my equipment, including my table, my temporary chair, I move it all away from my shack, I set everything up, I connect it to an antenna, I connect the computer, I make contacts for a day or two on it, and then I pack everything up without going back near the shack again. That way I know everything is there that I need to operate and I don't forget anything behind. If I try and do it in the shack, I'll forget something on the table. So I actually move everything to an isolated area, use my field day table and everything to do it. So here's some examples of operating on a picnic table outside of Glacier National Park. We took the Amtrak out and stopped in East Glacier. By the way, the most memorable part of this, besides the goats, was the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes are huge, they're vicious. I covered myself in mosquito repellent, so they bit me under the eyelids, in the ears, and under my fingernails. I was in Acadia, Maine on Cadillac Mountain, Acadia National Park, and I was the first station in North America to have sunlight strike me on field day morning because of the height and the east location I was at. This turned into more of a eyeball QSO because I was near main path and I talked to a lot of people. This was a very public place, and I had to stop operating phone in the morning on Sunday morning because there was 2 weddings taking place, and so I switched over to CW so they wouldn't hear me yelling. This is down in West Virginia near Cass. We went and rode the train afterward. This is my wife K8ZT. This was a yurt in West Virginia in the Panhandle. This is down at Hocking Hills. This is in Vermont, really nice Airbnb. I'm operating 2B, 1B for the first time here. The station on my right, in this slide on my left, is the FT8 station. The other station is my single sideband and CW station. I have a radio in this box and then the radio on the desk here. This is 2 years ago with Toga State Park down in West Virginia. This deer ended up coming up right behind me and sticking its snout on my shoulder. They don't have any fear of humans there. We had all sorts of animals running around. Okay, so if you're going to operate solo, your license class may greatly influence the bands and modes you can operate on. If you're a technician, you're limited to your technician privileges. We'll talk more about that in a moment. If you have HOA requirements at your house and you still want to operate, you might have to squeeze something in. I'm going to skip over a couple of these slides. So if you're operating as a technician, you have 6 meter single sideband, 2 meter simplex, 10 meter single sideband, and CW on 80, 40, and 15, and digital on 10 and 6. So that's what you're limited to. I have a whole slide presentation on Technician's Life Beyond Repeaters that talks about all those things you can do as a technician. Satellite contacts, if you are going to make satellite contacts, they suggest you make only one. So you get your bonus and you leave the satellites available for other people to make contacts, especially on the low Earth orbit satellites. Most of them are FM, and because of that, it's one station can use the satellite at a time. Okay, so one of the important things about field day is the learning that takes place at field day, but I suggest that you work with your local club and do some training ahead of time. Online group presentations, such as the one we're doing tonight, is helpful. I know Pat has one scheduled on June 4th for the Crooked Radio Club. It's going to be on HF operations and on logging for field day. A lot of clubs do this sort of thing. There's also how-to videos out there, collections of resources, and checklists. I would suggest you start on this now with your group. There's information on the AWL field page. I have a presentation on contesting. There's a number of presentations I've done and other people have done on digital operations, simplified rules, etc. Okay, let's talk a little bit about power. We'll come back to training a little bit later. There's a couple different type of emergency power options. A generator, solar power, batteries, or alternative power such as hand cranked, bicycle cranked, water wheels, etc. If you plan on using a bicycle crank for your power, be aware that you probably want a battery because you're not going to be able to keep cranking fast enough to operate, and you're probably not going to be able to be the operator and the cranker at the same time. So try it out ahead of time. Don't wait until then to try it out. If you're using if you're using a generator, you can get a bonus for using natural power such as solar power or generated power, or a battery charged with this ahead of time using solar power. That's the easiest way to get that bonus. Just take one radio offline from your generator, make 5 contacts, and you get that natural power bonus. These are all resources on generator power and generator safety, battery power. You'll see these things called solar generators. They're not really generators. They are batteries designed to be charged with solar panels, but they can also be charged with electrical. They work out great. These are big enough that you can operate a station on these for quite a while. There's a number of them out there. You need to make sure you find the one that does what you need it to. If you're looking at one of these, I would suggest you look for the ones that have the ferric phosphate batteries in them. They're more expensive, but they are charged many more times and they are much more reliable. If they don't say ferric phosphate, they're not ferric phosphate, they're lithium ion. So lithium ferric phosphate batteries will say that they are, and they are usually a little more expensive, but much more reliable. If you need to power a computer on emergency power, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, you have the battery that's built into the computer, but it might only last a couple hours. You can also buy these power banks. They look very similar, but they're a lot bigger than power banks for cell phones. They're about the size of a textbook, and they have 20 volts of output. So with these adapters, you can plug it right into the charging port of your laptop, and I can operate my laptop with a combination of this device and the built-in charge for a full 24-hour field day operation. Also, you might want to think about laptops or that have less power consumption or are 5-volt based or 12-volt based. You do need to log your field day contacts. For a very small operation, you might want to do it with a paper log, but for me, that means 12 or less contacts. After that, I want to use a computer for a lot of different reasons. This is a really good article on interfacing computers and radios. It talks about all things with serial and USB ports. It's a video from Bob's N6 TV. You can watch that for a bunch more information. Here's the video itself. That's the slideshow, the link that I gave you first. This is the video link, so you can watch Bob on this link. A lot of people will be using contest logging software. One of the most popular is N1MM. It is a free Windows-based open source software. It supports field day very well. There's information here on it. I have a YouTube video that I did on it in 2021. There's also some other videos here I have from some other people, how-to videos, some more. The other very popular program is N3FJP. It's a commercial program, but the field day package only costs $8.99, or you can buy all the contest and the general logger for about $60. It's probably a little bit easier to use than N1MM, but it's not quite as powerful and doesn't have quite as many features. There's some good information in these videos on it. Some more videos on using N1M and WSJTX. There are some other software programs. I'd suggest you skip them. Go for one of the two main ones that most people are using. So how does the score work? The score is based on the number of QSOs you make, and for each phone contact, you multiply it by 1. For each CW contact or digital contact, you multiply it by 2. And then you add that together, and that's your total QSO points. You then get a multiplier based on the power you use. All your stations must meet the power maximum to get the bonus though. So if you want 5 watts or less, all stations have to be operated at 5 watts or less. You get to multiply your score by 5. If all your stations operate with 100 watts or less, you get to multiply by 2. If any of your stations use more than 100 watts, you get to multiply everything by 1. You then add on all the bonus points that you earn, and that's how your final score is determined. When you submit it, you might need proof for some of the claims, so take pictures of all the bonus activities is a great way to have proof to be able to submit. Keep track of all the operators for your go-to station, any any youth operators, etc. Make sure you document everything. These are some of the some of the bonus points available: 100% emergency power, media publicity ahead of the event, public location, public information table, a message originated to Tom as our section manager, message handling up to 10 messages, satellite QSO, copying the W1AW bulletin. You can even copy this on Friday night before the field day begins, or you can copy it at different times during field day. But you have to copy it off the air. It's available in both CW, PSK31, and voice. You need to copy down the whole thing. Having your site visited by an elected or government official, having your site visited by a representative of an emergency agency such as Red Cross, the go-to bonuses, web submission of your score, 18 and under younger participants, social media, safety office bonus, and alternative power, or also referred to as natural power. And you can see that Class A has all the bonuses available to them. Some of the other classes have limited number of bonuses available to them. As far as publicity, it's probably one of the most important parts of field day, trying to get the word out, because remember, this is a demonstration to the public of what amateur radio can do and to potential future amateur radio operators. I suggest you have some sort of public information or education activity at your site. And I have an article with ideas on this you can click on. This ran as part of the one of the Ohio section journals, and it's AWL field day activities for youth, but a lot of them can also be used for other people. Building a little Morse code key out of clothespins and a block of wood, a number of resources that you can do, and a bunch of other information. I also have a 10-minute video that you can play in the background to have it loop over and over again so that people visiting your site can see information, especially if you're in an area with a lot of people visiting you. The Ham Radio Youth resources right here. A really good resource is this one on free receivers. It tells you how to use software-defined radios on any computing device, including your phone, to be able to receive stations. You can even have this written up so that people that are visiting your site can go to one of these sites, tune in to your local stations, and listen to your stations that way also from a remote location. For all these materials, what I strongly suggest is print them out on 11 by 17 size sheets, have them laminated, and then with the QR codes, people can simply shoot the QR code and take the information home with them. These are some more resources for the poster size printouts that I talked about. So I talked a little bit about training. Let's talk about warming up for field day. There's a couple of contests coming up that are great training opportunities for your field day participants. If you want to do some CW training, this is the weekend to do it. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. starts the CQ WPX CW contest. It'll go from 7 p.m. Friday night until 7 p.m. Sunday night. Chance to work DX stations around the world, but better yet, a chance to get used to HF CW operations, test out your logging software, test out your radio interfaces, and get that ready. If you're thinking about operating digital during the field day, the first full weekend is the AWL Digital Contest, a good time to try out FT8 and FD4. If you want to test out your portable station, go out and set up a portable station for the AWL June VHF UHF contest. The first full weekend in June, and a really good opportunity to try out phone and or CW is during the 3 QSO parties that are in June. These state or province QSO parties are a great opportunity. They're low key. They're not as frantic as the CQWPX. There's the Kentucky party, the West Virginia party, and the Atlantic Canada party, which is a new party this year that includes like PEI, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Labrador, etc. So 4 great opportunities to test out and to train people before field day. There's also the phone fray, which is every week on Tuesday evenings. There's a single sideband sprint for 1 hour. It's again a great chance to try out your HF skills and test your logging software. There's also 3 different contests during the week: CW Ops, MST, and something called the slow speed test. Those are available on different days during the week, and they're 1 hour long. It's a great way to test out CW. You might also set up a local simplex net to make sure people are familiar with operating on HF, and you can do it on single sideband so everyone in your club could take part. You can pretend it's field day. Set up FT8 and FT4. If you plan on operating at a field day and you've never done it before, do it before you go out. Do a POTA operation. There's going to be a Northeast Ohio Club POTA activation on May 31st. That's a Saturday, next Saturday. It'll be most of the day. You can pick any state park or national park you want. Go out and set up. You don't have to do any contact with other clubs to get ready to do it, but I know there's going to be at least a half a dozen clubs in Northeast Ohio that are going to be on the air activating 1 or more POTA locations on May 31st. If your local club is interested in doing it, you can find out more information by visiting a couple of the Facebook sites for some of the other Northeast Ohio clubs. I know Norris is doing it. I know CFARC is doing it. I think Western Reserve is doing it, and I'm not sure what other clubs. If you are going to be operating and your station is not already on the station locator I showed earlier, make sure someone takes care of doing that before field day. And maximize your field day experience. Learn something new. Record videos. Take photos so you can share with other club members who didn't get to attend. Have an inter-club competition with your neighboring club. If connected to the internet, use real-time online scoreboards so people can see how you're doing. Here's information on those if you not familiar with them. Write up an article for your club's newsletter. Create materials for local media coverage. Live stream your operation. We had someone come out and live stream from our site a couple of years ago. The 330 website live streamed from our field day site. And when it's all over, sit down with your field day group and pretend it was an emergency situation and write up an after action. What was supposed to happen? What actually happened? Why was there a difference? And what can we learn from this so you can be better field day next year? If your club enjoyed field day, consider adding some additional activities to your club throughout the year. And I also have some resources. I showed you the antenna resource already. This link here will take you to a resource that gives you 2 pages. The first page is all the AWRL sections sorted by the number that they're associated with. So all of New England would be in the 1s, and the 2s with New York and New Jersey, but there's also the Canadian provinces in here also. There's also some common Q signals and the phonetic alphabet. When you go to the next sheet, it's the same sections again, but this time they're listed alphabetically by the name of the section. So if we look at this, we can see a couple things. Let's look at the threes. There are 4 sections in Ontario. So the exchange is just on Ontario. It's going to be ONE for East, ONN for North, ONS for South, and GH for the Golden Horseshoe, which is the Greater Toronto Area. One of the other most commonly confused ones is the O's. People confuse ORG, which is Orange County section in California, with OR, which is Oregon. So take a look at this list and make sure all your group is familiar with the abbreviations before time. Now, using the computer logging programs will help you somewhat, because if you put in PA for the abbreviation, it won't take it. It's going to tell you that that's not a valid section abbreviation, because it either has to be EPA or WPA. So that resource is available. You're welcome to print those out. There's also a map of ARRL sections. I clicked on the wrong link. There's an ARRL section map that shows where all the sections are with the abbreviations. What is amateur radio poster that you can put up at your site? The Get on the Air poster that I designed. When you click on this, it's going to have you make a copy, so you can customize it for your particular site. So once you click on that, you'll get a copy that you can edit, and you can put all the information in you want for your go-to station, so people will know what the go-to station is about by looking at the poster. I mentioned the free REX on getting on there with software-defined radios. And you can get all the field day resources at this link, tiny.cc, FDRES, or you can shoot the QR code. That'll give you all the resources I talked about in one location. When you click on this, you're going to see a page that comes up, and it'll have all the links to everything I talked about as far as resources go. If you're new to HF or new to VHF, there are 2 4+ hour sets of videos available. There are four 1-hour videos for each of these. For beginners HF that I did with Dennis Kidder, W6DQ, and a beginners VHF UH guide with Marty Wohl, N6VI. These are great not just for field day, but for any new hams that are new to operating. I also have 3 presentations making HF single sideband contacts, making digital contacts on HF and VHF, and making CW contacts. So that's the end of the slideshow, and I'd be happy to take questions, comments, etc. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at the questions that were asked on the survey, and we're going to take a look at the survey results. But I want to leave this up for a few seconds. Again, tiny.cc/FD2025 will get you this entire slideshow, and I'm going to put that in the chat also. As soon as I find out where my chat disappeared to, there we go. Oh, that's not right. Let me fix that.
That Q code will take us to it too.
Yes. Okay, I also put it in the chat. Okay. My contact information and my website and all my presentations are available also on this slideshow. So let's take a look at the survey. We had 29 people respond. It's not too late if you still want to go ahead and respond. We'd be happy to. And we had 29 responses. Almost 80% of the people said they planned on attending field day, and 13% said they weren't sure. As far as the number of years of participation, our largest number was 28.6%. That's 6 to 10 years. But very close behind that was greater. 25% of the people said they've participated for greater than 20 years. We had 1 year was only 1 response for 1 year. And for the 6, 11, and 10, we had 4 responses. How will you be operating? 75% of this people said Group A, which really excites me. I'm glad to see that. 2 people said that they were going to operate from an EMC, and 2 people from home as a D or an E, and so forth. For main power source, it looks like we're pretty evenly distributed between battery and generator, slightly edged it out with commercial power coming in third. And let's take a look at some of the questions. So this person's interested in hearing about antenna setups others will use, so we'll take comments on that a little bit later. How to improve the club score. One of the biggest things is getting as many bonus points as you're eligible for will really help the score. The second thing that really helps is keeping the stations on the air as much as possible, thus resulting in many more contacts. If two operators are each working 2 meter, 6 meter, and 10 meter, will logging software be able to see duplicates? You can interface you can use the networking capability of your software to allow that. So if you want to run N1MM, you can set up an N1MN network. You don't need to have internet access to be able to do it. You simply need to be able to set up local Wi-Fi at your site, and that doesn't have to be connected to anything outside. It can do that through networking. It's a little more involved than I have time to talk about today, but you can do that. And you might want to even consider doing that more if you have stations that might be switching bands and mode during the contest, so that there might be an operation with the same band and mode at a different station at a different time. That way they'll be able to see all the dupes. So networking is a good positive thing to do. If you're interested in that, go to the N1MM site and go to the section on networking for more details. How many points did the section manager get for stopping by? How many points does the section manager get? Tom, how many points do you get for stopping by? Yes, there is no points for the section manager stopping by. You get no points, he gets no points, but if you're nice, you'll feed him. So that he might get some free food along the way and a nice greeting, but he doesn't get any points. So anything new? Very few things are new this year or different from last year. I went over those changes already. So what I'd like to do now is open up for questions. I'm going to look at the chat first because I know there's some questions in there. I'm going to try and answer those. Let's see here.
Hey, Anthony.
Yes.
The question came up, when is field day? And it's June 28th and 29th. As a
Yes.
general rule, it's always the last full weekend in June. So, you know, as long as there's 2 days on the weekend, the last one of those is in June is going to be field day weekend. Plan on it for the next 20 years or so, and you'll be good. And the other thing you just alluded to was keeping your stations on the air, especially at nighttime, and especially on bands like 20 meters. There's been a lot of times when I've worked 20 meters in the middle of the night, and you'll find that you'll hear a couple of big guns out there all the time, and then you'll get pockets of activity that come up, you know, maybe 10, 20 stations at a time, and then it drops off for a little while, and you either call CQ or you look around. But it pretty much is there's gonna be stations there all the time. You aren't the only one out there looking for points, but being on the air is the most important part of that, because you don't make any points when you're off the air.
So Kim had a good question in the chat. She wants me to talk a little bit about CW readers and for assisting in CW, because some of the people do go a little bit fast. A couple things I can talk about CW readers is, first of all, they're not perfect. So don't expect perfect copy from the CW reader. But the good news is, with CW readers and with copying CW by ear, a lot of times, other than when you're copying the call sign, you can get a lot of things by context. So even if you miss or have trouble with one of the two characters in the exchange, you might be able to figure out the exchange from the other letter and the station's location. But if you are thinking about using a CW reader, some work better than others. I would definitely try them out. This weekend is a great time during the CW WPX contest to try them out. A couple things help. One is good filters in the radio. So a radio that has good filtering will improve your ability to use a CW reader. Listening for faster stations is actually, they tend to decode better than slower stations with a CW reader. Having noise reduction and other tools like that can be very helpful. On the other end, as far as sending CW, there's nothing wrong with using your computer to send CW no matter how you're copying it. And that will mean that the CW that is being sent will be nice and clean, and the people that are using the readers or using their heads will have an easier time copying it. So the stray key's fun and play with, but when I'm doing something, an activity like this where I'm sending my call sign multiple times and exchanges multiple times, I use the ability of N1MM to send the exchange directly from the software. And you can interface your radio to do that. Something like a Win keyer in line or different types of keyers. You can send commands directly to the radio to key the radio. But sending good CW is helpful to everyone. Also, I want to remind people, one of the problems is everyone wants to be on the same band at the same time. And we are lucky enough this year for the second year in a row to have 10 meters and 15 meters open because of the sunspot cycle. So spend some time on those bands. There's technicians that are limited to those bands alone. And guess what? They're nice and clear. There's not a giant crowd like there is on 40 meters. So get off of 40 meters and move around some and try the other bands out. That's a big complaint I have last year. Everyone was on one band, and we could have worked many more contacts of people to just spend some time visiting the other bands. So did that answer your question at all, Kim? I think it was Kim that asked that. Going down the chat. Yes, go ahead, Kim.
Yes, I was actually asking for a specific tool to use other than,
There's a couple radios that have built-in CW decoders that are pretty good, like all the Elecraft radios, the KX2, KX3, the K3. If you're looking for a software-based tool, CW Get's a pretty good program. CW Skimmer is a pretty good program. There are a few other ones. I've not had that much experience with them. There also are some hardware devices like the Ham Prep CW readers. They're a hardware device that work with your radio. That little keyer that I showed, that Funtronics keyer that was in one of my pictures, has a built-in decoder. I'm not sure how good it is. There's also some radios that have decoders that the Kenwood 590 SG has a very good decoder in it. So if you have someone in your group that has a Kenwood 590 SG, it has a good decoder in it.
okay, thank you.
If you have other questions, please feel free to contact me. Anyone, if you have any other questions, just drop me an email. A couple other things in chat. I want to correct the name of Pat's group. It's the Crooked River Amateur Radio Club. Canton is going to be also participating in the POTA activity. Let's see. Mark says they typically use multiple dipoles resonant on the desired bands. They also have a beam on the club trailer. If you are putting up dipoles, one of the best ways to arrange dipoles is end to end. If you put them that way, they get less interference with each other as opposed to putting them parallel to each other. So if you can put them end to end is better than putting them parallel to each other. If you can't put them end to end, put them at 90 degrees. It's better than being parallel. Parallel is probably the worst way you can have your dipole set up. Other questions now? Either go ahead and raise your hand, put it in chat. We'd be happy to do that. The question was, can the presentation be reviewed? I'm assuming you're going to post this video, Tom, the recording. Okay, so Tom's going to post the recording and have it available.
It'll be on the Ohio section website no later than Monday or Tuesday next week.
Very good. Other questions?
Question,
Yes, go right ahead.
you kind of slid over the number of points per contact. Digital is two points, right?
Yes, digital and CW are 2 points, phone is 1.
Right.
And it's any type of digital, RIDI, PSK, FT8, FT4, Hellscriber, whatever you want to use. I don't know what image contacts are worth because they're single sideband, but they are digital in a way, so I think they're digital, but most people don't do images during field day. Other questions?
I have one, Anthony.
Yes.
Is there a trick to at field day sites like we're going to be running? What we're planning is going to be, we're going to probably run a a 3 alpha or 5 alpha. Is there a trick to running verticals, and how far do you think they'd have to be apart to
Well,
keep from splattering?
you're going to get some effect no matter how far apart you have them in that circle. But I would keep them as far apart as possible. Try not to have them within a half wavelength of each other.
Yeah, they'll be at least
Would
that
be the
far away.
minimum distance. What a lot of people do, they'll put them along the periphery of that 100-foot circle, so they're far apart. It also depends on what band you're on. If you're using a single band, it also depends on which type of vertical you're using. Like if you're using a trap vertical that's multiple bands, you might see a difference between using a 43-foot vertical with an antenna tuner. There might be less interference from a trapped vertical because it's the other frequencies are being trapped. I don't know for sure on that. Also, single band verticals would be less susceptible to interference than multiple band.
We were thinking that it's that there's going to be a couple of the radios are going to have traps on them. As far as band cavities.
Yeah, if you're doing that, it doesn't matter what type of antenna you're doing. And just a word of warning, if you are running stubs or cavities or any types of traps, make sure that you are operating them on the right band, because you can destroy a radio by using them with the wrong band that they're designed for. Also,
Yeah,
the selection of radios is very important. That's one of the big things. Some radios are perfectly fine on their own, but when you put a couple of them together, you put them near another radio, they're very problematic. One of the more popular radios out there is the ICOM 7300. It has a rather bad reputation for working in groups.
What about the DX10?
It seems to be very good. The Elecraft K3s work very well. Multiples. A lot of big contest groups use them, and they're running a kilowatt close to each other. Typically, cheaper radios like your low end Zygus and some of those radios don't have as much filtering and protection, but the DX10 is pretty good. I've had some experience with that at field day. Flexes are pretty good.
All right, thank you.
But one of the big things to do is test this stuff out ahead of time. That's why I'm suggesting these couple contests that are coming out are great opportunities to try out any equipment that you want to test. Other questions? Please go ahead. I'm happy. Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, would you expound on
I
the
think you did.
7300?
They're very good.
Yes, the 7300 is a direct receiver. There's no front end filtering before it gets to the digital stage. It's a true SDR, and it just doesn't have a good reputation for working in crowds. It's perfectly fine on its own, but when there's other radios around, it can be problematic.
So it's not the proximity to the radio, but how close the antennas are?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both.
So if the radios are not sitting next to each other on a bench, but they're in different parts of, on different tables and different.
It won't matter.
It won't matter.
Won't matter because it's going to bring the stuff in through the antenna.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions?
Good job.
Well, thank you, but I'd be happy to answer more questions.
Anthony,
Yes.
you said there was an inline computer program for the CW.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Kim. Could you repeat that?
And you said there was an inline computer program for CW. What is that called?
There's a couple of them. There's one called CW Git.
Okay.
It's a Morse decoder from DX Software.
Okay, I did write that down. Thank you.
Yes. There's also, let's see, what's it called? Prep CW decoder. It's PrepCom. They have a hardware device. And the radio I mentioned was the Kenwood TS590 SG, not the S. It's only the SG that has the CW decoder built into it. Another program is CW Skimmer. Oh, I forgot to mention it. There's a link in the show here. I forgot about that. I skipped over it, but there's a whole presentation called Fun with Morse Code that I have. And if you go to that, it talks about all these different aspects of operating Morse code. It also talks about decoders, encoders, keyers, keying, interfacing the computers. This all is covered in this this presentation, Fun with Morse Code. I forget where I closed it by accident. But that's it, tiny.cc/FWM. And that's a long presentation on using Morse code. I also have one on using FT8 and FT4. So those are all available. And again, all of those are available if you go to my links right here, tiny.cc, I'll put this in the chat, tiny.cc/K8ZT-P. That will take you to this page that's a spreadsheet, and it has all 40 or 50 programs. There's a bunch of beginner stuff. All those beginner guides I told you about for VHF and UHF are here. Antennas, buying equipment, call signs, contesting, clubs, CW and Morse code, DXing, field day, food, FT8 and FT4, general information, HF, history of broadcast, interviews, logging software, operating, QRP, QSLing, portable operations, SDR, software, state QSO party challenge, station setup, tech licensees, 10 tech radios, trains and amateur radio, VHF and UHF, youth, and a presentation on Zoom. So those are all available. And if your local club would like a presentation, I'd be happy to do one for your local group. Just contact me, and I do 2 to 3 somewhere around the world every week. I've done over 500 since 2020. Other questions, comments, suggestions for anyone, helpful hints? Okay, Tom, I'm not hearing anything else.
All right. Well, I just want to say that, when you listen to a lot of presentations and things, you always wonder about the presenter. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that Anthony has been an active amateur radio operator for a long time. And most of the things that he has these presentations on are from things that he has actually done. And when we were talking about field day, when he was talking about field day and showed you all the different places that he operated from, he's out there doing it. And I think he's having fun most of the time that he's doing all this stuff. So it leads me to think that going out and doing the activities of amateur radio is what gives you a lot of the head knowledge of how things work. And it also gives you the fun of being out there and doing it, because you can't have that fun if you're not there. So Anthony puts on a great presentation, and he's an excellent asset for us here in the Ohio section. And Anthony, we appreciate you doing this very much. So
Thank you. It was very enjoyable. I love doing it.
And okay, we'll leave it with that. This will it takes a little time to at Zoom to get the presentation back to me, and we'll get that sometime over the weekend, the first part of next week. It will be up on the Ohio section website. So I appreciate everybody coming out here tonight, and
I
we'll
just
be
have one
happy
other
to.
quick thing.
Yeah,
By
go
attending
ahead.
tonight, you're required to work me at least once during field day at K8ZT.
Mhm.
I'll be 2 Bravo, West Virginia. I'll be on all bands, and I'll be on all modes.
Yeah, and they actually get a point for that. As a point,
Yes.
if I stop by, it's nothing. But okay, yeah, work Anthony. Listen for him out there, and listen for your other stations in Ohio. And it'll be good practice for Ohio State Parks on the Air coming up the weekend after Labor Day. So look forward to seeing you and hearing you on that weekend
I
also.
forgot one other thing I wanted to mention. If you are interested in what other clubs are doing activities, have done activities in the past, if you go to the ARRL website and go to the field day site, you can download the line scores from last year, all the last 10 years. Plus, you can also download the copies of the a CSV file, so you can actually analyze the logs and you can search through it. So you can sort out just the Ohio stations and make a list of all the calls that were used in Ohio. If you want to try and track some of the other Ohio stations, that information is all available on the ARRL website, and you can get that information and analyze it, sort it, whatever you want to do with it.
All right,
Yes.
well, hey, appreciate everyone being here tonight, and I'll just toss it out there one last time. Any other questions?
These
If
are the
not, I
Ohio section
appreciate y'all.
operations, by
I
the way.
appreciate you all being here tonight, and we'll look forward to hearing y'all and seeing some of you on field day weekend. 7-3.
73.
7-3.
And Anthony, you want to make me back the host?
Yes, I will. I got
Perfect.
a couple windows until I can get back to that window again. Okay, here we go. You are host.
All right, good. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and we'll look for you soon. All right, and here I go.